Hello, and welcome back to the Genealogy radio show, the radio show that's keeping you in the loop. The show airs from Radio Corcabashkin in beautiful Kilkeen and is repeated on a Sunday at 4 p.m. And on this week's show, we will be discussing the importance of organisation in regards to family history research. Jack, can you tell us a bit about reasons why you should research your family history?
Yeah, so researching family history has always been a decently popular hobby, and you can see in media or maybe you know someone who's been making a family tree. But today it is exploded in popularity with the rise in sites such as 23andMe and Ancestry, both DNA testing companies, which can tell you where your genes came from and what percentage of you is like Irish, for example, in any other country. So this has translated into a growing interest in where do these percentages come from? Which of your ancestors moved over to where you currently are? And but this has led to wondering, like, it led me to the question of why you should research your family history. And I've come up with two major reasons. The first reason is simply enjoyment. It's why most people do it. The process of researching a family history can be long and tedious, but it can also be fun, somewhat. But ultimately, it is kind of cool to know where your great great grandparents are and where they came from. It's just interesting to know where your family came from, how it expanded, and maybe even like reach out to long lost relatives, especially for descendants of immigrants, where it's especially interesting to know why they may have moved. The biggest reason for descendants of Irish immigrants in America being the Great Famine. The second reason that I came up with is health. It is important to know your family's history itself. What I mean by this is knowing, does your family have a history of diseases that may be hereditary? For example, blood pressure may be in your family. This will be a challenge because being realistic, you can only find out close enough to your generation. And the main way that you'll find out is through testimony, by talking to your grandparents or your parents about their parents and figure out what they might have ailed their parents or whatever. And this can just be important in knowing what you can do and what you can prevent that might be more likely to happen to you. I'll pass it back to you, Chloe.
Thank you, Jack. Victor, can you tell us a little bit about where to research for your family tree?
Of course. So where to begin your family search? Beginning your family tree can be daunting to say the least. However, it is good to know that there is an array of sources readily available to utilize to help jumpstart your family search. Firstly, I would begin looking at home. Here you can find much information in family Bibles, newspaper clippings, military certificates, death and birth certificates, marriage licenses, diaries, scrapbooks, photographs, and many other documents. Then you can go on to relatives. A family search, whilst maybe it's one person's particular area of interest, will need the help of a lot of relatives and friends. Visit, telephone, or write those in your family who may have information, particularly older relatives. More often than not, others before you have gathered data about the families in which you are interested. Write a letter, make a personal visit, or perform a telephone survey to find out about such persons and what information has already been collected. In addition to possessing vital information, family members may also know family stories that can be collected and preserved for future generations and may assist in your continuing research. You can look in the National Archives. The National Archives and Records Administration maintains records that are of great use to genealogical researchers. The National Archives and Records Administration holds records documenting military service, passenger arrival, taxation, court actions, land ownership, and much more. The next place you can begin to look is the church. As everyone in Ireland can attest, the church played a hugely significant role in Ireland, and as such, has many valuable resources that you can try to gain access to. Investigate the possibility of finding new genealogical data in the records of the church to which your ancestor belonged. A few churches have records of important events in the lives of their members and provide valuable information for family historians. The next place you can begin to look is the internet. This is arguably your most valuable tool. However, it is not for documents nor first-hand accounts from friends and relatives, it's the internet. The internet has hundreds of different websites and posts designed to help you at the touch of a button. For instance, Ancestry.com is readily available to most and contains many different documents. The National Archives of Ireland are dedicated to helping you find documents, whether it's the tide allotments or Griffith valuation or just immigration records. There are also many different genealogical websites ready to help. Here are just a few of them. There's Access Genealogy, Family Search, Heritage Quest Online, Oliver Tree Genealogy, and Roots Web. And they're just 5 of the free general anyone can access genealogical websites and free to most. And they're just a few of the places you can begin your search. So I'll hand it back to you, Chloe.
Thank you, Victor. Thanks, Victor. Apologies for technical difficulties. Sarah, can you tell us a bit about the key steps into organizing family files for family research?
Of course. The key principles to organizing family research. The first key principle is to organize and document as you go. Before you start your research, have a research log and a well-documented family group record in hand. After your research, do not finish until you have documented all your paperwork and your filing. Have a hierarchy of research goals, an overall goal to share your research finding with others. Have a goal to research a cluster of families, usually families that settle near each other. Thoroughly document the events of one of those families before starting research on the next family. Have an objective to document one event at a time in a person's life in that family. If your first search fails, continue with that same objective, but with different sources, jurisdictions, or repositories. Don't give up until you find a source to document the selected event or exhaust all the possibilities of trying. Study families in a community context. Get to know the kin and neighbors and the roles they played in your ancestors' family. Research the easiest events first. What you learn from the easier to find documents will help you find more difficult ones later. Do not reorganize your files until you pick up research on a family. No mass reorganization of all files at once. Add custom names to your files. When you scan a photograph or find a historical record online, save the file to your computer with a descriptive name. The default names generated for most files won't be meaningful to your research or help you find the file later. Instead, take some time to create custom file names. Use what's called the EASY system, one family equals one folder. This system is based on creating one file folder for each family you research. One family consists of a father, a mother, and their children. Make a new desktop folder for each individual family surname. Make individual folders for different types of documents or other genealogical info. Include folders for branches of the family in the primary surname folder. Make file names with dates first so they can appear in the chronological order that you want. Each ancestor is in 2 different families. One is a child and one is a parent. Log and file sources for events prior to marriage in the father's folder. Log and file events starting with marriage in the husband's folder. When a source lists more than one family, pick the most predominant family on the source document. Put the document in the family's file. Compose your document number based on that family. Log such a source and all applicable research logs. Some logs will list another family's numbers. That is good. Make each log list of all sources that apply to that family, regardless of where they are filed. Second marriages, in-laws, and stepchildren. Log and file sources about these relatives in the file of their closest relative that is on your pedigree. Do not create one huge research log for all families. Such a log is not useful as a table of contents to a particular family source's copies. Individual folders and locality folders. Some researchers like to expand the basic one family equals one folder system by also creating a folder for selected individuals, or sometimes all the people in one locality. These are options, but doing this creates questions about which folder gets which sources.
Thank you, Sarah. Now back to you, Jack. Could you tell us a bit about Dean, can you tell us a bit about how we could use censuses as a form of mapping family trees?
Sure. A census is the procedure of systematically calculating, acquiring, and recording information about members of a given population. This term is used mostly in connection with national population and housing censuses. Other common censuses include a census of agriculture and other censuses such as the traditional culture, business, supplies, and traffic censuses. The censuses provide a great deal of data when trying to put together a family tree. Any given census provides basic and also some additional details. However, the basic details are the most important, as it is these that are used to trace or build a family tree. The census can be accessed online as it is part of the public record. It's easy to pinpoint the exact house and location of family members in small villages from this by cross-referencing from an ordnance survey map. The addresses from the census can trace more ancestors at secondary level. Secondary local sources can be accessed once you have the address from the national database. You can source information on additional relatives from parish records once you know which parish to contact, local newspapers, wills, and deeds. In small villages, it is quite easy to track a local family and its various branches to add to your own family tree. It's more difficult to track in larger towns, as you may have to contact a few local parishes. If you can't find information about your family branch from a very useful address, particularly if their place of dwelling is between census years, then you can look for a child's birth that may be recorded during one of the census years and trace this particular line of ancestry in this way. It is also important to note that the census itself is not merely subject to a few odd inaccuracies due to human error in the way it was organized. It is also subject to legislative constrictions. It wasn't possible to look at the census beyond 1901 until 2009, when the 1911 census became available. However, the information can be gleaned. The information that can be gleaned can be built upon and added to. The census provides vital information when giving it the address and country of birth. The census is a key source of information when trying to trace your family tree. However, it is important to be aware that there are some errors or problems, as mentioned above, to be aware of when using this tool. Other sources of information should also be used to verify or contest records.
Thank you, Keen. Now back to you, Jack. Could you tell us a bit about using census substitutes in this matter?
Yes, so census substitutes are records that, like census, provide lists of individuals living in a specific area and information about them. They are important because they can provide information that can be normally taken from the census, but in circumstances where the census records are either destroyed or inaccessible. For example, little remains of the censuses between 1821 to 1851 because of Ireland's archives, which were destroyed in a fire in June 1922, around the time of the Civil War. So the need for information that will be stored in the censuses must be fulfilled through census substitutes, which offer the same information, like Griffith's valuation as an example, which was a land survey carried out between 1848 and 1864 to determine liability to pay the poor rates, which was to support them and under the Poor Law Union. But then what this does is it provides detailed information on where people lived in mid-19th century Ireland and property they possessed. And so this is just important because, like I said before, this information isn't available in the census. And so these records that basically act like censuses can be extremely important just when the census records are either destroyed or inaccessible. I'll pass it back to you, Chloe.
Thank you, Jack. Now to wrap up the show, Eve, could you give us a brief run through on how one would start their own family tree research?
Absolutely. So now that we've looked at the research and really understand how to look at family history, we're going to bring it back to the basics. So to start your family tree, you'd begin by putting down the date and location of your birth and marriage, if relevant, for yourself, your spouse, and your children, as well as the important events in your parents' lives, such as their birth, marriage, and death. This is the beginning of your family tree. So you can now begin to work back through the generations. So if you collect pictures, birth certificates, documents, and other family history files from other family members, they will serve as the foundation for your research and will provide you with the pointers to help you to begin your search for the following generation of ancestors. So at this point, you're ready to begin the first draft of your family tree. So at the bottom of the page, you plot the family's youngest generation, assigning a box to each person, with the oldest child on the left and following siblings listed to the right of the previous name. Then, like in generation 1, we draw vertical lines connecting each sibling to the two parents and write the parents' important dates, establishing a new horizontal line of ancestors for each generation. So after you've explored your family sources, the internet, and your local family history centre, you might want to visit the areas where your ancestors resided, such as courthouses, churches, cemeteries, and other locations where old records are stored. This is also a really gratifying opportunity to follow in your ancestors' footsteps and really bring that sense of family history to life.
Thank you, Eve. And I would also like to thank everyone else here today that helped us with the show on organizing family history. I hope you all learned something new in this week's show. Again, this show airs out again on a Sunday at 4 p.m. from Radio Corker Bashkin. Thank you all so much for listening to the Genealogy radio show, the radio show that's keeping you in the loop.